Hello, AP Environmental Science. The purpose of this video is to give students who missed any of the Chapter 7 notes an opportunity to get them finished up. Please remember the two rules about class notes is they need to be done in Cornell note style, so draw a line down the center of the page, and they also need to be numbered. Please remember, because this is a video, I will be moving through the slides at a quicker pace than I do in class. And I will warn you when I am ready to move to the next slide, so you can pause the video if you are still writing or typing your notes. All right, without further ado, here we go. Chapter 7 gets into species interactions, succession, and controlling populations. Chapter 8 gets into the human population. Chapter 7 is just populations in general. All right, here we go. So types of species. So I'm going to abbreviate SP for species. So competition, predation, preying on or being preyed upon. And then types of symbiosis, parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. All right, interactions, importance, why. We're going to abbreviate resource as well. So they affect resources, how those are used, and they also influence the size of the populations within the ecosystems. Competition. Inter-specific competition is between different species. Intra-specific competition would be between the same species. So using the same resource. Is that resource water? Is that resource food? Is that resource space? Is that resource sunlight if we're talking about plants? Just making sure I'm still recording. All right, moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. It's a resource partitioning. So they did this study. I learned about this in one of the crash course videos. So there are these species that live in same tree. And to avoid different species. They're different types of warblers, but different species. To avoid competing with one another, they chose to feed in different places within the tree. Remember, competition, between humans is different than competition in nature. Competition between birds in this case, if one of those birds were to get into a fight and they get injured, they can't just go to the birdie hospital and get fixed up. That could potentially be a fatal injury if it gets infected. So they really want to limit the competition between themselves. So different parts of the tree, maybe they feed at different times, maybe they feed during different seasons, depending on the type of tree and whether or not it's got food during the different parts of the seasons. All right, predation. Predator feeds directly on a member of another species, prey. Of course, if it's the same species, that would be cannibalism. How do they do that? Walking, swimming, flying. Some predators use camouflage so they can surprise their prey. Some prey use camouflage to figure out how to stay away from being eaten. Chemical warfare, especially in the insect population. Skunks would be a perfect example as well. That's how they fend off predators. So they use chemicals that's in their spray. I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so prey methods of avoiding being eaten. Like I said, camouflage, chemicals. In some cases, they just simply taste bad. So before they get crunched down upon, um, just toxins and chemicals that are on their surface, the predator realizes they don't taste all that great, and they let them go. Frogs, in particular, have bright colorations to indicate that they are poisonous. Some frogs actually are not poisonous, but they have these colorations because they survive, because predators don't think they are good to eat. Mimicry, looking like a different type of organism or looking like an organism that is poisonous, and different behaviors as well. I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, use this as an opportunity, please, to practice with your notes. Studying now. It's going to save you time studying later. 5 types of species interaction, and circle the most common one. Take a look back at number 1 if you can't remember. All right, so yeah, we got competition, predation, parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism, and you should have competition circled. What is it called when different species use traits or behaviors to avoid direct competition for a resource? Might want to take a look at number 4. Yeah, it's called resource partitioning. 3 methods prey species use to avoid being preyed upon. Take a look at number 6. Camouflage, chemical warfare, behavioral strategies, mimicry, all those are ways they avoid predation. Okay, moving ahead. Okay, so if you are a species, and let's say you're stronger than others in your population, or you're faster, or you're smarter, that can allow you more opportunities to survive. And of course, those good characteristics came from your genes and your DNA. And then you get, if you survive longer and you get more opportunities to eat, you get more breeding opportunities. And that means you pass on those characteristics to your offspring. And then over time, that characteristic that gave you an advantage gives other organisms in the population because they're getting the genes that are being passed on. So the population will change to one where more organisms have that advantage. So predation, by getting rid of the weak genes or the non-advantageous genes, can actually lead to evolution. Coevolution, that's when changes in one species influence another one. 2 organisms change together. It's like certain birds and insects that get nectar from plants. Slowly over time, the structures in the plant change, and there's always variation within bird and insect, all animal and plant species. So maybe a couple organisms actually have the right shape to get to that food. And then they pass on those characteristics to their offspring, and slowly over time, the population changes in response to a plant changing. There are lots of examples. That's just a really easy one to understand. And then parasitism. It's when one species benefits, that'd be the parasite, and the other organism is harmed. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the parasite to kill the host, because remember, they're getting free food. Typically, it's food. Sometimes it's habitat. It's typically resources that they're getting, food resources. Tapeworms live in intestinal tracts. Fleas, obviously, they feed off your pets. Mistletoe is a big one. You'll see when the trees drop their leaves around the neighborhood, you'll see these green, bushy things living in them. That's mistletoe. Mistletoe is stealing resources from that tree. In some cases, there's so much mistletoe in there, it'll kill the tree. So if you have one of those trees on your property, I would recommend getting rid of the mistletoe as quickly as possible. I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mutualism. That's where both organisms benefit. So in this case, it looks like these birds are picking insects off of the herbivore. So they're keeping them clean. So the birds are getting food. The herbivore is keeping parasites or insects, staying hygienic. Some cases, especially in the oceans, you'll have small fish will stay near large fish, and they'll get protection. And in return, they will eat parasites off of the large fish. In many cases, clean maybe bacteria off of the large fish. So it's not cooperation. It's not like they're saying, "Hey, I'll let you do this if you do that." It's this: they're both exploiting a resource, and it just happens to benefit both of them. A perfect example is the clownfish, Nemo and Marlin, and the anemone. If you guys have seen Finding Nemo, you might be giggling. So the clownfish get protection, and they also feed on waste from the anemone. And the clownfish protect the anemones from other predators or parasites. I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Commensalism. So this is when one organism benefits and the other one really doesn't benefit or have any negative either. So that's like the barnacle and the whale. Barnacle is a filter feeder, so it needs to be exposed to more patches of ocean. Whale takes them around, so they benefit, but the whale really doesn't care if the barnacle's attached. It's not really doing anything. Certainly not, taking any food from the whale. So an epiphyte, remember from the Planet Earth Jungles movie we watched not long ago. These are plants that attach themselves to trees. So they attach themselves high up in the tree. They actually can get more sunlight, and they're not taking anything from the tree. And then, of course, barnacles. You can see all those brown barnacles living on the whale. I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, how are predation and evolution related? I want to take a look back at number 7 for this one. Yeah, so remember, organisms that have certain advantageous characteristics, they survive the predation. Their genes have a larger proportion within the gene pool. They get more opportunities to breed, and they pass those characteristics on to their offspring. And then over hundreds or thousands of generations, all of a sudden the population all has these characteristics that give an advantage with respect to not being fed upon. All right, match them up. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Match up the letters. So this is going to go back to number 7 and 10, 12, 13, 9. All right, so predation is a feeding relationship. That's D. Parasitism. One organism is harmed, one is helped. That's A. Mutualism. C. Both organisms benefit. Commensalism. One organism benefits. That's is helped, and one is indifferent, which means it doesn't care. Yes or no. That would be B. All right, let's get on to succession. So succession is how organisms over time populate an area after some sort of a disturbance. It's kind of a way to predict the types of organisms that are going to appear over time. It's a primary ecological succession. Sorry, we're abbreviating. So primary starts with just simply solid rock, no soil. There actually are these species called lichens that can actually survive on solid rock. They can chemically break down the rock and get nutrients that way. And then as these lichens die over time, they create a very, very thin soil layer. And then eventually you're going to have some simple plants come in, and then more complex plants come in, and then animals come in. And then eventually you'll get to climax community, which typically is forests. So they need to build up the soil. Also, primary succession can happen in the oceans where there are no sediments available. I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Right, secondary ecological succession. So this is when you start with soil. So you're going to have more complex organisms coming in more rapidly. By the way, primary succession typically happens after some sort of like a disturbance, like a volcanic eruption where lava is laid down and it kills everything, all the vegetation, or a massive flood that washes away all the soil and all the sediment down to bedrock. Secondary succession would be a situation like maybe after a forest fire. So all the plants and animals are gone from the area, but there's still some soil. And matter of fact, it's pretty fertile soil because all the carbon that came from the burning vegetation is now recycled back into the soil. Like I just said, a burned forest, cut forest where you still have soil. Okay, rate of ecological succession. So it really depends on what species are there, because the plant species that are there are going to influence the animal species that come. If you've got ample resources, you've got good resources in the soil, lots of nutrients, lots of sunlight, lots of water, it's going to come back a lot quicker than if this happened in a drier, more arid climate. All right, moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so the idea of the balance of nature, ecological succession proceeds to a stable climax community over time. So basically, equilibrium equals balance of nature. So that's the traditional view. Current view, succession leads to more complex, diverse, and resilient ecosystems and can handle changes. So the organisms that are going to come back and repopulate this area would be stronger, more adapted, and more able to handle changes that are not sudden. Larger sudden would be like a volcanic eruption, a hurricane, wildfire, flood. So inertia. So if you have an ecosystem that can survive moderate disturbances, it's got good inertia. And resilience. Can an ecosystem be restored through secondary ecological succession after a moderate disturbance? So can it survive the disturbance, and can secondary ecological succession take place? I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, blank succession begins with a layer of soil, while blank succession does not. You might want to take a look back at number 15 and 16 if you can't remember. Yeah, so secondary succession needs soil, primary succession does not. So that would be the second combination. Example of a pioneer species. I can't remember which number that was on. Oh, there it is. 15. Yeah, lichens and mosses. All right, which view of the balance of nature suggests a more complex, diverse, and resilient ecosystem? The traditional one or the current one? Might need to take a look at number 18 for that one. Yeah, that's the current. All right, moving on. Population sampling. So qualitative sampling can be done whether or not the species is there. Quantitative, you're actually using numbers and units and tools, like for example, population size. Just today in AP Environmental Science, we started working on a lab with regards to population size, estimating it, mark and recapture method, population distribution, and density. Quadrat. Sorry, I don't have any more detail on the quadrat sampling. Mark and recapture. So these are used to estimate the size of a population for a mobile organism, so one that can move around, but it's got to be in a defined space. And essentially what you do is you catch a certain number of organisms and you tag them or you mark them somehow and you let them go, and you wait an amount of time, and then you go back and you get more organisms and you figure out which ones were previously marked, and then you can do a calculation to come up with an estimate for the population size. Population density, which is the number of organisms per area. And this is a math problem for you guys to try. So So if it's number of organisms divided by the area, calculate the population density for this organism, this insect organism. So all you got to do is you got to divide 185 by 14, and you will get 13.2 insects per square meter. All right. Moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, kelp forests. These are keystone species. They provide shelter. They provide habitat. They help reduce erosion of seahorses. What? I'm going to open up my book and get some clarification on that. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I probably typed that wrong. Chapter 7. It's supposed to be shore erosion, not seahorse erosion. Yeah, so basically they take the brunt of the waves that come in, and they also help trap some of the sand that's flowing out into the ocean off of the coastline. Let me make a quick change to this real quickly. Sorry. Version of seashores. Oh, that does say seashores. I'm sorry. It looked like seahorses. Never mind. Brain fart. Sorry, it happens. Okay. Yes, they are in danger. So the holdfast is the structure on the bottom of the kelp. So sea urchins eat that, and pollutions also kill kelp. Climate change is influencing them. So obviously, if these organisms are gone, it's going to throw some chaos into the food web. Sea otters are also another keystone species that help maintain the population, help reduce the population of sea urchins, which help protect the kelp. So the kelp like the sea otters. I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so what are 2 examples of quantitative population sampling methods? Might want to take a look back at number 20 for this one. Yeah, so these methods are going to help you with population size, distribution, and density. 2 threats to kelp forests. Take a look at number 25 and 6. Yeah, so sea urchins, pollution, climate change. Which keystone species helps kelp forests survive? Look at number 26. And that, of course, is the sea otter. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you back in class.